It's the final day of Steelers minicamp before the team breaks, gets some vacation time, and then gets ready for training camp in late July. But a lot was talked about the defense. We got our first chance to talk to Brian Flores. Teryl Austin is the new defensive coordinator and how everything is looking for this year. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're going to talk about what they were talking about, what things are looking like at minicamp, and some of our expectations for the season. Joining me today is Josh Taylor of KDKA TV and 93.7 The Fan. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video. If you enjoyed, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily content. We have Monday through Friday episodes, as well as breaking news updates and bonus episodes whenever we get extra questions. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Be sure to use the promo code Locked On at checkout. We'll talk more about that later. Joining me today, as I said earlier, is Josh Taylor of KDKA TV, 93.7 The Fan. You know him, you love him. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. He does all the things. He's always talking sports. He's very knowledgeable about football, wrestling, baseball, whatever he's. I don't know what he's not knowledgeable about. Josh, how you doing?
I can think of a lot of things I'm not knowledgeable about, so we'll leave that to a minimum. But I'm good, man. I'm excited. I'm glad you picked the day like today so we could talk about defense. We've talked about it all off season, so I'm very looking forward to that. Also, I don't know if you can tell that quiet, low murmuring sound might be on my radio colleague continuing to bellyache about Kenny Pickett not being number 2 on the depth chart. So hopefully that kind of takes a break for a while so we can talk defense and get off some of the other stuff that really doesn't matter. So let's get into it.
We might talk about that later, but we'll see. But I wanted to focus with you about the defense because yesterday, on Wednesday, the Steelers had their defensive coaches talk, and that meant Teryl Austin, of course, defensive coordinator, and of course Brian Flores. It's crazy enough. You think everyone would be all over the defensive coordinator, and they were. But Brian Flores gets just as much of attention for not just his lawsuit, but for what are you doing? Like, what is the focus? Like, how are things going? I thought this quote from Teryl Austin was one of the more telling quotes of just what this defense is going to be, because everyone's asking what's going to be different this year. Keith Butler was the defensive coordinator that took over from Dick LeBeau and all this. What's going to be different this year? What's the goal for this year? Is this defense going to look anything crazy or different than we're used to? This quote I thought said a lot. Teryl Austin said, quote, "If there is anything for my fingerprints on this defense, it's that we're going to be an aggressive defense. We'll be disciplined. We will be sound. We won't give up big plays. We will keep scores low. We want to give ourselves chances to win. Good defense requires getting off blocks, tackling, stopping the ball, and turning the ball over." Now, I don't know about you, Josh. That sounds like what the Steelers defense has been about for quite some time.
It sounds like what I've been talking about for quite some time now. It sounds like what's really been the blueprint for this defense for the past nearly 3 full seasons now. You and I have talked about this quite a bit, about the importance of keeping the other team scoring low and forcing turnovers. Why? Because let's go through this again. I'm going to go right back to it. Yeah. Since week 3 of the 2019 season, when after Ben Roethlisberger injured his elbow, the Steelers in 47 games are 29-17-1. In 22 of those games, the defense gave up 20 points or less, and the team had an even or positive turnover margin in each of those games. And that was before Teryl Austin was the defensive coordinator of this team. But if you go back to years past, when Teryl Austin has been defensive coordinator, a lot of people want to throw that 1 year in Cincinnati. That's the year I actually throw out because it's the worst of the lot. It's the outlier. The year I look at the most is the year when he was in Detroit with Jim Caldwell, and he was Jim Caldwell's defensive coordinator. And the thing that did pretty well, they kept points low, they stopped the run, and they forced turnovers. even if you want to go back to the 2019 season when Teryl Austin first made his appearance as the special defensive assistant here. What did this team do well? They kept points low and they forced turnovers. They were really, really good at that. So the fact that I'm hearing him say this, it's like nourishment to my soul, because I've been telling people for months now, this is what you expect in a Teryl Austin defense. Keep points low, stop the run, and force turnovers. This team is already going to get after the quarterback. They've been doing that for like half a decade better than anybody else. That's not even going to be an issue. But if it sounds like a broken record, because that's what Teryl Austin's defense is normally like, that's what a Mike Tomlin defense over the years, whether he's been a head coach or an assistant or a defensive coordinator, has been like. And also largely, you pointed it out, that's what the Steelers defenses have been like largely over the last, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so. Mm-hmm. So all of this, none of it is surprising to me. It's pretty much what I expect. So it feels like confirmation to me. Like, okay, you're not crazy. This is the right thing to expect from this unit.
No, I feel you on that. And I mean, I even remember going back to Ryan Shazier's rookie season in 2014, and when the defense was struggling, and everyone was asking like, you know, how does the defense get better? He said the first thing we have to do is stuff the run. You have to get back to stopping the run, because if you don't win first down, it's harder to win second down. You don't win second down, it's really hard to win third down when that's third and short. And you have to get off the field, and it starts with that. And here's the crazy part for me, Josh. The Steelers defense, yes, it ranked in the 20s when it came to points allowed and yards allowed, blah, blah, blah. But the Steelers defense, like you said, carried the Steelers to the playoff. I mean, and not just carried, drug them. They dragged them through the mud to get to the playoffs last year without a rushing defense. Like the very philosophy that is the Pittsburgh Steelers and has been the Pittsburgh Steelers, whether it was Tim Lewis or Dick LeBeau or Keith Butler or, you know, now Teryl Austin, has always been about stopping the runs so that everything else can fall into place. Right. That never fell into place for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, and yet they still found ways to win. I guess my biggest question when looking at all of this is, you know, I've been talking about if this defense can get back, this defense needs to get back to the top, but can they be, as they are constructed right now, with Minkah Fitzpatrick and Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Devin Bush and Akella Witherspoon, with those being the guys, and Miles Jack, with all those guys being the focal point, can this be a top 10 or maybe even top 5 defensive unit by season's end here? Because to me, I know there's a lot of excitement about the offense, but if you get that kind of a defense, it gives that offense that many more chances to find its rhythm.
I'll say top 10 might be the height for me. That might be the high note. And even then, I'm okay with that. But let me put it to you this way. If this defense becomes just in the top half of the league, 15th or 16th or better, that would be a vast improvement over what they were before. Because if they end up in the top half of the league, that means the run defense significantly improved.
Right.
I'm glad you brought up how much they struggled last year. They gave up 4.8 yards a carry last season. That's the most they've ever allowed in franchise history. If you can wrap your mind around that. That's how bad it was. However, two things I want to point out. I'm glad you mentioned Ryan Shazier in 2014 talking about winning first down, winning second down, getting off the field on third down. Would you believe this team last season was 7th in the league on third down and they were 5th in the league in the red zone?
That would make
it kind of hard to believe.
It's not hard to believe for me. And this is why.
For me either, but still.
Right. You and I, we study this. This is why I do think they can be a top 10 defense, even without Stephon Tuitt right now. I think I think that the absence of Stephon Tuitt means they go and get somebody, not necessarily defensive lineman, could go get a cornerback, could go get another pass rusher to back up TJ and Alex, and they could get a lot of different options. But this team, like you said, 7th on third down, you know, one of the best teams in the red zone. That's why they were winning those games defensively. They were winning situational football when they couldn't beat you with dominate the entire game, win the situations. That's why when you hear Mike Tomlin talk about 7 shots, which at the start of every practice, the offense and the defense go at it 7 straight times from the 2-yard line. Mm-hmm. Can the offense punch it in? They work on situational football consistently. To me, this is a part of what Mike Tomlin gets done so well at the coaching level to get guys ready for those situations. Because if you took that away, the Steelers would be a struggling football team. And people are probably thinking, well, they do struggle. They haven't won playoff games, and they lost the first round of the playoffs last year.
Let's talk about why, though.
Yeah, right. There's another reason. But I'm talking about, I'm not even going there. I'm going to the point of a struggling football team to me is picking in the top 10. Like guaranteed, yes. Like you just know this ain't the year for you. You just pick it. You get in a high draft pick. The Steelers ain't been in that position under Mike Tomlin. The only time they picked at 10th overall is when they traded up a whole bunch of picks to get Devin Bush. We'll get to him in just a second. But Josh, to me, the situational football, the talent that's still on this roster, that's where I think that if the run defense, again, doesn't have to be immaculate run defense, just solid run defense, it wins those first and second downs so that you can get to third down and then you pin your ears back. And that's the thing. Last year, they didn't have the dominant run defense to set up the pass rushers to have, fun situations or obvious situations where they have to pass in certain types of ways and the quarterback has to hold on to the ball longer so that receivers can get further down the field. And they still led the NFL in sacks for a fifth straight year, unprecedented in NFL history.
And they had a guy who matched Michael Strahan's record and won Defensive Player of the Year. All that happened without having a strong run defense. So
having the worst, not a strong, the worst run defense.
The worst run defense in the league. So just imagine if this run defense jumps into the high 20s, like 21st or 20th, and maybe 18th. That means this defense got that much better because when you're dead last, all you can get is better, relatively speaking. So if that happens, that's one thing I'm expecting. And one reason why I'm expecting it, if you have more than 5 quarters of Tyson Alualu, your run defense is probably going to be better. And one of the reasons why, when they had Tyson Alualu healthy the first half of 2020, they gave up less than 4 yards a carry. That was third best in the league.
Yep.
That's how good that run defense is with a healthy Tyson Alualu. Notice I didn't mention Stephon Tuitt.
Right.
Just having Tyson Alualu on the field as your nose tackle. That's one thing you're looking at. Then you bring in Miles Jack, who's a very competent inside linebacker and probably the best compliment you're going to find for Devin Bush since Devin Bush has been a Pittsburgh Steeler. And Devin Bush is now 1 year removed from that ACL injury. I imagine he feels a lot better physically. I imagine he feels a lot more confident mentally. I imagine he's able to make a lot better keys that he needs to make. And it also helps having Miles Jack next to him and Brian Flores in his ear and Teryl Austin in his ear. And he's got a lot more people to help him not only, understand what he needs to know, but process everything he sees better. And he's got a better complement next to him. This is probably the strongest pair of inside linebackers we've seen in half a decade at least. Now we're talking about a situation where you have a run defense that if for no other reason is only better by default, but that's what could make this entire unit and elevate it up. And we didn't even mention we haven't even touched on the fact that they got corners now that intercept passes. Because Ahkello Witherspoon played 9 games, started in 3, and led the team in picks with 3. So that's a vast improvement.
Josh, I want us to take a break so we could get into the linebackers more because that is the second topic of this show. So we're going to take a step back and address that. But first, I got to talk to you guys about Blue Nile. Of course, whenever you're ready to pop the question or you're just celebrating a milestone moment with fine jewelry, you can find fine jewelry as unique as her with modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, so be sure to use the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all one word. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece when you visit BlueNile.com today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Josh Taylor. We're talking Steelers defense. I want us, like I said, I didn't want us to dive too much into the Devin Bush thing because we had to save that for this. Now, Devin Bush spoke last week, and I addressed that on this show about him feeling better than he did last year. He feels like last year he was trying to catch up because last year he was still figuring out how he wanted to land when he left his feet. Now he's more so figuring out, this is how I want to play in my position at off ball inside linebacker. And I addressed on Monday Merrill Hodges' comments about Robert Spillane being the best linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, whatever. But I wanted to look at these comments because Teryl Austin and Brian Flores spoke quite a bit about Devin Bush. Also, there was an article from Bleacher Report that listed every team's X Factor player for the 2022 season, and they listed Devin Bush as that guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because if he can be that guy, and their theory is if he can be that guy, it changes a lot about what the Steelers are doing. But I want to get to the quotes from the coaches here. Teryl Austin said that that Devin Bush has approached things well. When it comes to this year's practice, he said he's been here for the most part, including the voluntary stuff. He's here now, asking the right questions in the meetings. He'll be better. He said, in my experience, guys who tear their ACL, they'll play the whole year, but they're not the same guy until that second year back from that injury. He said, we're hoping to see that uptick in performance. We want to see that guy, the guy that was here before this injury. And then Brian Flores, he's never worked with Devin Bush before, but he said Devin's very talented. He's smart. He has a good, they have a good rapport with each other working in the off season. He said it's not something that you talk about all the time, but he says this is something that they're building towards and something that they're working on all the time. And he says he looks good out there, and but the biggest thing is you can't tell how good things are until the pads go on and you see the physical levels there. It really seems like, Josh, that that Devin Bush is a big key, and it's not. It seems like he is a big key to what the Steelers need to be here this year. But if him and Myles Jack, and I've said this for a while, if they play on a really strong level, and they're a big reason why the Steelers run defense is back, and they're helping with coverage over the middle. Again, they don't got to be immaculate in coverage. Just make sure that you're not being exposed every single play. This changes everything about the Steelers. The Steelers' defenses have always been the best defenses, have had their biggest strengths right up the middle, whether it was the Steel Curtain with Mean Joe Green at nose tackle, and with Ernie Holmes as well at defensive tackle, with Jack Lambert at inside linebacker, and then you had Donnie Shell at safety, whether it was the 2008 defense with Casey Hampton, James Ferrier, and then Troy Polamalu. All those guys, that the middle of the defense has been their strength. This is a defense now with Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick. They just need the linebacker component. I guess I'm saying all that to say, Josh, this is vital to their Steelers 2022 campaign is Bush's recovery, not just recovery, but stepping back into the shoes that he used to fill, and Myles Jack living up to the hype that when they signed him.
Well, Chris, let me preface it by saying this, and I'm going to say something else. It's probably going to get me looked at sideways next time I walk in the 93.7 The Fan. Ooh. But players are allowed to recover from injuries.
Yes,
folks.
They are.
They're allowed to recover from injuries, and they're allowed to come back better than they were pre-recovery. It's okay. It's also okay to remember before a guy got hurt, he was actually pretty good. I look at Devin Bush in three phases: pre-injury, injury season, and post-injury. Injury season, Devin Bush, you kind of take that one out and kind of toss it off a heap. Post-injury, Devin Bush, the comments that I think that we heard from the coaching staff, when you expect a guy to be better his second year post-ACL surgery, I think that speaks for itself. And it's not like we're saying it, Chris. It's not like you and I are making this up. This is the coaching staff that is saying this. And for some odd reason, there are people in this parish that don't like to take what the coaching staff says seriously, which I don't know. Maybe I'm going to listen to Brian Flores and Teryl Austin more than I'm listening to Joe from Blawnox. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Maybe I haven't learned anything.
Why do y'all always pick on Joe from Blawnox?
Joe from Blawnox talks too much. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't know you, but I hear from you all the time, and I need you to be quiet. So, Joe, just take a break. But if the coaching staff is telling us this, I'm going to take that at face value over what I hear from some dude in the street. That's all I'm saying. So the last thing I'm left with is pre-injury Devin Bush. Pre-injury Devin Bush led this team in tackles in his rookie season. Had 100-plus tackles, had 6 takeaways, had 9 tackles for loss, and finished 3rd in the Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. That was pre-injury Devin Bush. Now, Miles Jack last season, 108 tackles. See, year before that, 118 tackles, handful of takeaways, handful of TFLs, maybe 6 TFLs a couple years ago. Now you're talking about 2 players that are both capable, if things go the way they should, both capable of collecting 100 tackles plus, both capable of collecting takeaways, both capable of making plays behind the line of scrimmage. Now you're talking about a linebacking group that I just said a few moments ago could be the best pair we've seen in at least half a decade, maybe even a decade. We may be going back to James Ferrier and Larry Foote. That might be how good it's been. If you want to make a case for Lawrence Timmons and Ferrier and Foote, then you can make a case for it. I'll listen to it. But my point is this. When you have these guys, if they're working at the level we expect them to, pre-injury Devin Bush in the last couple seasons of Miles Jack, then you're going to have a linebacking core that can actually do the job well and stop the run. Oh, and there's just my son and the dog making an appearance on the show. That's the second time that's happened this week. But you have a linebacking core now that can at least step in and make this run defense better. Not only because of the fact that they're producing at a level expected to, but because they're actually healthy and capable. And when they're healthy, they are capable. That's the thing we know. That's the thing you see in black and white. The numbers speak as much. And see, my son agrees that they will tell you this much. The numbers say as much, and it's not that hard to dictate, and it's not that hard to sort out. I'm one of those people, and this is going to get me yelled at work, and I don't care. But I'm one of those people that's actually bullish on Devin Bush because I'm looking at post-injury Devin Bush 2 years out, just like the coaching staff is bullish on Devin Bush 2 years post-injury, because that's what you're supposed to expect. So if that's the case, that pairing makes me feel a lot better than the pair we've seen last year when it was 1 year removed Devin Bush and Joe Schobert, or the year before that, we saw 6 different players play inside linebacker. Did you feel good about that season? I didn't. So if nothing else, this group might look better. This pair might look better by default. And as far as Robert Spillane possibly being the best guy in the group, if that's the case, then why did Robert Spillane only play in certain situations? Why were they taking him off the field on 3rd downs? Maybe because coverage was an issue with Robert Spillane. Yes, he defends well against the run, and that's all well and good. But wouldn't it be better to have 2 guys you could just leave on the field all the time? Wouldn't that be the ideal? I mean, it's kind of hard these days. In this modern NFL, it's hard for a defense to try to keep subbing in guys based on certain packages. Offenses can do it as much as they want to. Defenses, it's harder because offenses can find mismatches in their personnel groupings, or you have teams that will stay on the field. They'll go tempo and won't allow you to substitute. Teams will find ways to exploit that. So your best bet, if you're going into this season, it's going to have to be Devin Bush and Miles Jack because those are the 2 guys you have out of that entire group that are going to be able to play 1st, 2nd, 3rd down and get you the best possible results that you can expect. I don't care what you tell me about last season. I don't care what you tell me about 2 seasons ago with Devin Bush. I saw what he looked like when he was 100%. I've seen what Miles Jack looked like when he was 100%. Matter of fact, Steelers fans saw it during the playoffs a few years back. It didn't look too pleasant on the other end. So if we're looking at all that from that perspective, give me what the coaches are saying. Give me how the players look right now compared to how they looked before. And that's the expectation I'm going to set for myself.
I hear you on that entirely, Josh. I think that's going to be a major point for the Steelers moving forward, just seeing how these 2 play together. And again, they're playing under Brian Flores, bringing this back.
Exactly. That's the X. He's the X factor, really. I mean, you want to talk about Devin Bush being the X factor player. Brian Flores is the X factor coach in all this, and I'll bring this back around too. Teryl Austin likes a defense that likes to force turnovers, and both of these guys, in Jack and Bush, at their best, are capable of collecting takeaways. This is going to be a very opportunistic defense. It is what I'm expecting. I haven't seen this in a couple of years, probably since 2019. This is what I'm looking and expecting to see, and I think it's going to be a lot better than we've seen in the past couple seasons.
It certainly would be a huge step up if the Steelers get a boost in their defense after their defense kind of saved their butts most of last season. And again, not just being a situationally good defense, but a dominant defense. And that's why
9 games last season, they allowed 20 points or less, and the team had a positive or even turnover margin, and they won all 9 games. It's not a fluke, people. It's not a fluke. It's like that way for a reason. It's the reason why they made the playoffs.
I feel you. But I think that's a big thing. But I wanted to keep talking about this point. And I want to I also want to address, Josh, a way of talking about this and how the offense and the defense feed off each other, because that's another big part of how this is going to play. We're going to talk about that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Built Bar. If you don't, if you know, everyone loves chewy, chocolatey brownies, but what about caramel brownies with a caramel swirl on top? That sounds amazing, right? But what if I told you that Built Bar has a way to get you all that chewy, chocolatey deliciousness, plus getting 17 grams of protein in with your diet? You're in luck, because their new caramel brownie Built Bars are available at built.com right now, and you got to act fast because they're a fan favorite and they will go quickly. When they sell out, they're off the website. Forget about dessert. These are better than dessert. Plus, the macros are unreal. You can get 130 calories, only 130 calories when you eat one of these, 17 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar. I would replace a regular brownie with Built Bar's Caramel Brownie Bar any day of the week. The best part, the caramel brownie bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, like for real chocolate. With Built, you don't have to sacrifice tasty for healthy. You can live with both every single day. And all the Built bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. There are a million reasons that you should try Built bars, but for now, let's just say that the caramel brownie will rock your world. That's not an understatement. With Built, tasty is the new healthy. Go to built.com and get your box of caramel brownie bars right now. And when you go to built.com, use that promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your next order when you order from built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast of Chris Carter, he's Josh Taylor, and we're talking more about the Steelers defense. But I want to balance it with the offense, because like you said, with how the Steelers ranked so high in third down defense, the Steelers, they weren't the worst third down offense in the NFL last year, but that offense continued to put the Steelers defense behind the 8 ball last year. You know, games like the Tennessee Titans, when the Steelers defense created 4 turnovers and still had to get the turnover to force a turnover on downs to finish the game. That, to me, like that was the craziest defense. Just do everything you can. Like that's when I was like, wow, this defense is playing out of its mind. And they had a few of those moments last year. You know,
was that the same game where, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but was that the same game where in the first half people were so upset about the Steelers not calling timeout when Tennessee had the ball, and Mike Tomlin said we were more concerned with stopping Tennessee's offense, and they held them to a field goal before the half? Is that the same game we're talking about?
That's the same game.
Just checking.
Yeah, like so we're on the same page there. But part of what can make the Steelers defense better is if the offense is just simply a little better. Like, we're not even talking about an elite offense. I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky or whoever wins the quarterback job, I still say it's going to be Mitch Trubisky. We're not talking about if this offense is top 10 in the NFL. I think that's a lot to ask. They have a lot of young talent, and they can make a lot of progress this year. But I do think that this is this is an offense that, with the athleticism of these young quarterbacks, with the young offensive line that's trying to put it together, I really think that this is a group that can, you know, they'll have the deep ball available. They'll have a little bit more balance for Najee Harris to get things open. We've talked about this, Josh. But if they are just middle of the road offense in the NFL, and that defense is stuffing the run, you're talking about this defense getting to set more tones in the game. There's not as much pressure on them to have to make all the stops. And by the time because the Steelers offense is doing well enough, by the time that the Steelers defense is getting their 8th time on the field, it's mid to late third quarter instead middle second quarter, like it was against the Chiefs in the playoffs game. Because again, remember, that Chiefs offense that eventually ended up annihilating the Steelers defense was being crushed by the Steelers defense for a quarter and a half until things turned around on the Steelers, because their offense just kept putting the defense back on the field. But to me, that's a huge part of this defense as well. Not just the defense's play, but the offense giving them more time to stay on the sidelines and not show everything in their arsenal.
I'm going to drop some numbers because people love to bring up numbers about how bad the Steelers defense was. So let's flip the script here on the Steelers offense. Okay. We always talk about how the Steelers defense was 20th in points allowed and 24th in yards allowed. The offense was 21st in scoring and 23rd in yards gained. So let's throw that out there. The defense played 1,116 snaps last year. The offense played 1,113.
Mm-hmm.
So let's throw that out there. Now, I mentioned how the Steelers defense was 7th on third downs and 5th in the red zone. The offense was 18th on third downs and 24th or 23rd in the red zone. So if we're going to talk about how inept the Steelers defense was, yes, they were dead last in the league in run defense. The Steelers run offense was 29th. So maybe, just maybe, there was a little bit that had something to do with each of these. And I'm glad you brought up the Kansas City game because the Steelers defense did something in the first 20 to 25 minutes of that game that no one else did all regular season long, and that was shut Kansas City out. Matter of fact, they even had a lead because the defense got the first 7 points of the game. That's how well of a job the Steelers defense had done, keeping that offense with that quarterback and those receivers quiet for nearly 30 minutes before the offense could even get anything done. And Kansas City said, wait a minute, we're the Kansas City Chiefs. And this defense is gas, so let's finally go run them off the field. And that's exactly what they did. All of that comes back around to something Mike Tomlin's been talking about for a long time now. It's 2 words. I can't remember. Oh, wait, complementary football.
When Josh says, I can't remember, he gives that face, just know that he's being very sarcastic and that he absolutely remembers what he's about to tell you.
Complementary football. How long has Mike Tomlin been using those 2 words in
2007.
Complementary football. And for the record, the Steelers aren't the only team that use that term. You'll have other teams around the league using it. You'll hear college coaches talking about it. Pretty sure I heard Nick Saban once or twice mention complementary football because it's a thing. To steal the adage from my old radio show. It's a thing. It's important for a reason because if the defense can keep the offense on the other team quiet, it makes the offense's job easier to score points. And if the offense actually does score points, it makes the defense's job to keep the other team off the scoreboard because they're not as pressed to avoid giving up the lead as opposed to maybe protecting a lead or maybe at the worst having a tie game. It's an entirely different dynamic when your offense gives you a 10-0 lead as opposed to your defense giving you a 7-0 lead because your offense can't score. It's an entirely different dynamic. I'll go all the way back to the 2020 season. The reason why this team won their first 11 games in the 2020 season was not only because the defense was keeping teams from scoring, which they were doing quite a bit, but the offense was also scoring pretty reliably and on a clip that they hadn't done in a while and in a clip we haven't seen since. There's a reason why they started so hot and why they tailed off so much after that. Because after that 11-game win streak, they went 1-5. The offense stopped scoring. Yep. And the defense could not hold the dam forever. I'm going to continue to put the premium on this. The number you should look at for both sides is 20. If your defense keeps the other team under 20, you got a shot to win. And if your offense scores more than 20, you got an even better shot to win. If you're looking at 20, if you want to say 25 for offense, your offense scores 25, you got a really good shot to win. But that's what it really comes down to with this group because both teams were towing the same line and neither could seem to really get over the hump. And that's why the results were the way they were.
I agree. And it's to me, when you look at the numbers that you're presenting, the third down success of the defense, the third down mediocrity for the offense. And again, Ben Roethlisberger was in his last year. No one's denying that the offense wasn't supposed to be elite last year, but this is, again, why I think there's so much hope for this year's defense and this year's team was you had the worst rushing defense, one because of injuries, not just injuries to Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Lulu, but also the injury that Devin Bush was recovering from. You didn't have Miles Jack. You didn't have an offense that was able to consistently move the ball. Those are the things that you put all that together. You add those to the team last year. Like imagine you added a younger quarterback who could get the ball further downfield, could use their mobility last year to that team. Imagine you added that and a team that could better stuff the run with more athletic linebackers. That team is different. They don't just finish 9-7-1. They have a shot to win the division because again, they only finished a half game back of the Bengals.
I'll make the case for all my colleagues who were bellyaching so much about Kenny Pickett being third on the depth chart. Last year was the year you needed Kenny Pickett. That was the year you needed him. That's the year you needed him on the field, because if he's running that offense with the ability to just run play action alone and make plays on the run, this offense looks 10 times better. That's just that small element of having a quarterback that can do more than just stand in the pocket and do nothing else. That element alone, that improvement alone. I talked about being the run defense being better by default. The run offense got to be better by default too. They signed two free agent offensive linemen. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't a coincidence, because they knew they needed to get better. They knew they got to have guys up front that could give Najee Harris. Oh yeah, by the way, Najee Harris, who did a lot with a little bit last year and gained a lot of yardage and still made the Pro Bowl. You give that guy a better offensive line and better lanes to run with. You mean to tell me this offense can't be more productive? You mean to tell me they can't have better third and short situations? They can't move the ball more frequently and gain more first downs and find themselves in better position to score points? Absolutely. Some of this is just improvement by default. If I'm expecting improvement by default on the defensive side of the ball, trust me, there's a lot of improvement by default on the offensive side of the ball that can happen too. And if both those things happen, we're talking about an entirely different team. And to your point, I agree with you. We're not talking 9-7-1. You're probably talking about beating Detroit. You're probably talking about not getting blown out by Cincinnati. You're talking about probably even beating Minnesota in Minnesota in a Thursday night game. You're talking about a team that plays better in every game, or a team that beats the Chargers when the defense got stop after stop after stop after stop in the second half, and even gave them the ball on the Charger side of the field in the fourth quarter, and the offense mustered a field goal after getting only about all of 4 or 5 yards in 3 plays. A more competent offense probably gets you 6 points and wins that game against LA, and you're probably in the playoffs, and you're probably hosting a playoff game. That's the difference that we're talking about. If these two units are just marginally better by default than what they were last year.
Again, we're just breaking things down. Same with y'all. We're not just saying, oh, magic willy-nilly, the Steelers are going to have a better team. We're saying the Steelers have the players on the roster. They have the philosophies. They do need certain things to work their way. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that Devin Bush will be better. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Miles Jack will be better than Joe Schobert. I don't think it's a stretch that having a healthy Tyson Alualu and a full offseason to actually prepare for Stephon Tuitt not being there will help them be better. I don't think it's a stretch to say that having a quarterback who can move on the run and who can throw on the run and an offensive line that has James Daniels and is going to have more experience with a lot of their guys on it. I think there's a lot of chances that those weaknesses will at least be mitigated. If they don't become strengths, they won't be like the liabilities that they were last season. And if you take those liabilities, make them that, and you still got your strengths of TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka.
Those guys are still there too?
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
oh,
just
okay,
in case y'all didn't know. Minka also was also practicing a bit yesterday, so that there was that too. And then you have the improvement of Najee Harris. You have the improvement of Pat Freiermuth, who we talked a lot about yesterday on yesterday's show, because they're standing out a lot in minicamp right now, along with
another X Factor guy.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Freiermuth, another X Factor guy.
Exactly.
Only 5 tight ends caught more touchdown passes than Pat Freiermuth last year.
That says 5. A lot. But
that's it.
That's
the list.
This is all my point. We're not trying to get you to just pumped up and think they're going to win the Super Bowl. I'm not saying all that, but I'm saying this team has the makings. You're going to see people like ESPN predicted the Steelers are going to finish in the top in the bottom 10 and get a top 10 draft pick. I don't see that happening. There's a chance they miss the playoffs, but I don't think they fall that far. I think this is a team that, come December when it's cold and we're talking about who's making the playoffs, the Steelers are going to be right in that hunt with everybody else, and even in striking distance to win the division. Josh, we're way over our time. I got to get us out of here, but thanks so much for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Josh Taylor HD. That is the place to be. That's where you find me. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, best places to find me. As far as radio goes, 93.7 The Fan. You can listen on the Odyssey app. Most Sunday mornings I'm there, usually early 7 a.m. is probably when you catch me there. On the TV side, CBS and Pittsburgh. Online, I think it's cbspittsburgh.com is the place where you can log in. You'll find my work there. Mostly Friday nights and Saturday nights. I'm at the anchor desk, so that's where I'm doing my thing.
Absolutely, do check Josh out. He is great in all the things that he does. Thanks, Josh, for your time on this show. If y'all want to check out more of the Locked On Steelers podcast, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. Check out all of our episodes. We do Monday through Friday every day of the week. We do bonus episodes. We do breaking news content when that happens. So do check us out. We try to put as much content for you. You can also check out more of my work out on my Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here. If you want to help out the Locked On Steelers podcast even more, go on Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars, give us a positive comment, do both at the same time, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Also, you can read my work at SteelersNow.com under the Pittsburgh Sports Now company, and we're doing a lot of great coverage live right from minicamp. I was one of the people talking to Miles Jack, talking to the coaches. I wrote about Devin Bush. If you want all the quotes about why Devin Bush is expected to make a leap in 2022, go to SteelersNow.com. Check out my work there. Thanks again for checking out me and Josh. We'll be back tomorrow. We're hoping to have Jenna Harner. She's got a busy schedule with everything going on, but and so do I. But we're gonna try to have Jenna Harner back on. If not, we'll still be here. So be here with us on Friday, talking up more about your Pittsburgh Steelers as we wrap up mini camp and get you ready for the summer.